He will commute this death sentence to life imprisonment on the condition that this man explains his motives, why he killed, and the one who killed preferred it. Welcome to another episode of Criminal Patrol. This is a story that in some way is still ongoing because a lot of people are still talking about this case. A terrifying case, a terrifying crime. Mateusz, a 31-year-old man, was killed, but the question of why he died is still open. Although the person who killed him says he did it because of some kind of settlement, it seems unlikely, and the case is still puzzling in this regard. Why did Mateusz die? It reminded me of a story from the United States where a man was sentenced to death. The state governor said he would commute the death sentence to life imprisonment, on the condition that this man would reveal his motives, why he killed, and the one who killed preferred to go to the electric chair, preferred to die rather than reveal his motives, why he killed. It's out of the question that this is the kind of case where the murderer, for certain reasons, perhaps because of how he would be treated in prison, doesn't want to reveal his motives. Well, this killer, in the case I'm talking about, is only 19 years old today. Today as well, in the town of Łódź, which is about 60 kilometers from Słupsk, there was a funeral for Mateusz, the very Mateusz who was killed in that gruesome way, a boy who, in my opinion, wasn't guilty of anything. He's the kind of person who, when there's a conflict or a problem, tends to step out of the line of fire and gets into minor disputes. So there's definitely no fault on his part here. And it seems that he died for reasons that are at this moment unknown to us. Mateusz, this 31-year-old, was from Miastko, which is in the Pomeranian voivodeship. He lived there with his mother and also with his two older brothers. Some time ago he decided to move out of his home and go to Słupsk, trying to find some happiness in that city. But he still had, I would say, a very good relationship with his mother. With Ms. Lucina, although, well, the life of Ms. Lucina, Mateusz's mother, also wasn't and isn't easy. She has Parkinson's disease and rarely gets out of bed. But she keeps in touch with her son by phone, and you can see that they're close, just like with her brothers, especially with Maciek. So that's important in all of this, because if Mateusz didn't call, then Mom would. So something must have happened because she was used to her son calling her. It's something that's ordinary, normal, and those calls from him were, I would say, an everyday thing. He came to Słupsk, worked here in Słupsk as a parking attendant, most often on Wilenska Street. That's where he was seen. As I said, he was a calm, balanced guy. He didn't earn much as a parking attendant. He rented an apartment in Słupsk, and it turned out that he was living there with a roommate who was only 19 years old. With Alan, as usual, well, Mateusz went to work every day. He left early in the morning and came back in the afternoon. That's how it was on November 24th. So you see, it was just a few weeks ago that he was working, and nothing unusual was happening at work. People saw him around 5 post meridium on November 24th, around 5 post meridium. His co-workers saw him on Beamer Street, and that's the last time anyone saw Mateusz. The next day, he didn't come to work, which was surprising because he was a responsible guy. He always showed up for work, but he didn't come in. His supervisor was notified. She informed the police, and the police started looking for Mateusz. They determined his permanent address in that town. They went to his mother and started talking. She was shocked because she didn't know that Mateusz was missing. Of course, she tried to call him many times, but it was useless. His phone was simply turned off at that time. The family filed a missing person report. It was routine, just like in every case like this. So his first name, last name, his description, distinguishing features, what he was wearing, his preferences, who he was friends with, where he might have gone, any favorite places, and a recent photo. That's everything you collect in such a case, and that's how it was with Mateusz. All of that was gathered. The police began to systematically check, of course. They take hospitals into account, they consider various places and institutions like the social welfare center, but there was no trace. Mateusz was registered as missing, and he was simply entered into the police database. A few days go by, it's exactly November 30th, and then Mrs. Lucina, Mateusz's mother, gets a text message. Well, the text message is terrifying. Well, it goes something like this. Do you still want to see your son, right? That's the kind of question it is. Pay 100,000 zlotys in a black briefcase so it's ready for tomorrow. If you notify the police, then our one-time deal is off and you'll never see your son alive again. Well, of course, after such a text message, Ms. Lucina and her brothers notified the police. It clearly indicated that Mateusz had been kidnapped, but also the phone was turned on almost a week later, so it had to be done by someone who was close to Mateusz because they knew the personal identification number, or possibly Mateusz himself could have done it. But in this situation, it was obvious that this was a family that didn't have any money. Mateusz himself probably wouldn't have come up with something like that, so everything pointed to the fact that the person who wrote that text message was simply behind Mateusz's disappearance. Well, Ms. Lucina obviously got upset, but quite sensibly, probably with the help of her sons, she replied that they were poor. Let us know, take a picture of him, and that's the kind of text message she sent. But after that, no one responded to the message, and it was no longer clear what was happening with Mateusz. Of course, these are all different life situations, and the police officers have to assume at times that a crime may have occurred, but there are also situations where someone is depressed, and Mateusz could have been in such a depression, different thoughts, different behavior. They also started looking into this angle, but in his social media they found a post with content along the lines of smile at yourself, smile at the world, and then the world will smile back at you. Well, of course, that's not something someone who intends to end their life would write. So it seemed that this version, that Mateusz went somewhere, that he was depressed, that maybe he was wandering somewhere, also seemed rather unlikely. Exactly a week passes because it's Monday again, December 1st. This time, Alan comes to the municipal police headquarters in Słupsk. So this is the 19-year-old who was Mateusz's roommate. He comes to the station, turns himself in, and says some strange things like that Mateusz assaulted him. So we assume that he simply beat him up and robbed him. Well, it was strange, puzzling, but that's the report he filed. I suppose that even then the police checked the logins, especially the logins from Mateusz's phone, and also Alan's phone logins. I suppose that those two phones, or their logins, just coincided. They also checked the moment when Ms. Lucina was receiving all those text messages, and from where the phone was simply logging in. That made them think. They also went through Alan's phone, and what they saw on the phone really shocked them because they didn't expect something like that. They didn't expect the horror and everything that they simply saw on Alan's phone. He starts being interrogated. It's a thorough interrogation. And basically, during this interrogation, he confesses to everything. He confesses that he killed Mateusz, that he did it in the apartment where they were both staying. All of this happened on the 24th in the evening, so on the day when Mateusz was seen for the last time. He attacked him with a knife, stabbed him in the heart several times, then dragged the body to the bathroom and started dismembering it. He just literally started cutting it up because he used 2 kitchen knives for that. When he had already divided Mateusz's body into fragments, into pieces, he took garbage bags and put the body parts into those garbage bags. He packed everything into a suitcase and went to the Recreation and Culture Park in Słupsk. There he dug a hole, dug a pit, and simply threw all the bags with Mateusz's body in and then covered it up. He confessed to all of it. He also admitted to that gruesome act. When the prosecutor asked him why he killed, he said he killed for robbery, that he simply killed because he wanted the money that Mateusz had with him, or might have had. Well, it obviously seems, as I said at the beginning, like nonsense, but that video, which basically started it all, was evidence. It's a gruesome video because, as far as we know, on Alan's phone there are not only videos but also photos of everything he did. There's probably no footage of the actual murder, but then everything that happened with the dismemberment of Mateusz's body, putting it into bags, burying it, supposedly. There are materials of this kind, clearly. These are shocking materials, but they indicate that Alan is the killer. When Alan confessed to the murder, the police officers, the investigation team went to the scene, to the park in Słupsk. They dug up all those bags, took them out, and brought them to the forensic medicine department. The autopsy began, let's call it that, and it turned out that Mateusz was killed. There were 5 stab wounds, and of course Mateusz had no chance of surviving. He was brought to the prosecutor's office, where he was charged with murder with particular cruelty, as well as desecration of a corpse. Of course, there will also be a charge of filing a false report of a crime, meaning that Mateusz allegedly committed a robbery against him. At the moment, he's temporarily detained and the entire proceedings are still ongoing. He is, of course, temporarily detained at the moment. Alan is only 19 years old and he also comes from a small town in the Kashubia region. His childhood, I would say, was not happy because at the age of 5, together with his 2 sisters, he was placed in a foster family. His parents simply drank, as they say. They were a dysfunctional family, and the court simply took the 3 children away from them and placed them in a foster family. However, Alan still had some contact with his family, I think quite often, especially with his grandfather or grandparents. He used to go there. Now, everyone says about him that he was a calm, introverted boy who liked to fish. He would sit somewhere for hours and fish. Also, at some point he had contact with his mother. He even went to visit her in the Netherlands where she lives. What happened to the father is unknown, but it seems that the father had mental health problems. By the way, Alan also had mental health problems. He was in a psychiatric facility twice. While we don't know at this moment, and that's part of the ongoing investigation, but it's clear from all of this that he had mental health problems, why he killed, what the reason was. He talks about this robbery motive, which seems rather unlikely. In my opinion, that's simply impossible. However, without a doubt, he tried to imagine it in some kind of cinematic way. He tried to organize an alibi by sending those letters and texts demanding ransom to Mateusz's mother. After all, he knew Mateusz. He knew that his mother was poor, that the family was poor, so there was no way they could gather even a part of such an amount as 100,000 zlotys. Well, he probably figured that he would try to lead the police on a false trail, that some group or organization was behind the kidnapping, and that this way he would succeed. Also, this robbery motive in the case of, I would say, Mateusz's murder is completely unacceptable because it was known that he, as a parking attendant, had no savings, no money at all. So what could he possibly find at Mateusz's place? You also know from our channel, from our previous episodes, that if someone kills in this way, kills with a knife with such passion, and on top of that dismembers the body and takes it away, it's also something inside them with such resentment, with such bitterness toward the other person that they cut up their body. He tries to get rid of it along with him, tries to get rid of all those thoughts, that bad kind of energy that made him feel like a loser. So you can see that this is a personal reason, I would say, but what kind exactly, we don't know at this moment. We also can't rule out that Alan simply made something up in all of this. Well, he had mental health problems, so without a doubt he will be examined by psychiatrists, we'll see. Of course, in a direct sense, he's facing life imprisonment, but it's not certain that the experts will decide he needs treatment. I wouldn't make any final conclusions about this yet. The fact is that he killed Mateusz, his friend, for reasons we still don't know. This gruesome case kind of reminds me of the Kajetan Poznański case, you probably remember. That's the guy who killed an Italian teacher in Warsaw. And he killed her because he wanted to test himself, because it was the highest level, kind of like an initiation, a test of his resilience. Kajetan said that killing a person is just like killing a mosquito. Well, it's not out of the question that something like that could have formed in his mind. Of course, we will continue to follow this case. We'll see what further steps the prosecutor's office will take. And we'll also see if at some point Alan actually admits what his true motives were. But I think that since he hasn't said it so far, there's something about it that he doesn't want to talk about. And even if it could lead to a reduced sentence, because it might, he still won't decide to tell the truth. And that's it for today's episode. Of course, subscribe to our channel. And as always, take care.